Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Burns, and I work for an international nonprofit called Education Development Center. We are based outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and we actually do a lot of work in the region. Over the last 15 years, I've been working in many places in the globe intensively. I've actually highlighted those, little geography lesson. Doing really around the intersection of technology and professional development. So I design programs for teacher training online and offline. I write national policies, I evaluate programs, and I actually teach teachers, which is still my favorite thing to do. So now, since this is actually a session on professional development, we're going to take a little quiz. I want to show you two photos. One is a football player, and one is a teacher. And I'm actually going to describe the professional learning of one of these people. And afterwards, I want to ask you who it is that I'm talking about. So one of these men receives continuous evidence-based instruction in the best practices associated with his profession. One of these men receives ongoing coaching and support from a trained professional to actually allow him to perfect the techniques that are most central to his profession. One of these men meets on a regular basis with his colleagues where they individually and collaboratively plan individual and group learning goals and try to achieve them. And finally, one of these men uses video to examine models of best practice and even to look at his own practice and figure out where there are shortcomings and try to improve on them. Now I want to ask you, who am I talking about? Well, if you're in education, you already know the person I'm talking about. The person I'm talking about is the football player. This is a conference about education innovation. But really central to any innovation, especially at a school and a classroom level, is a good teacher. And my message is really a very simple one. If we want to promote educational innovations that work, we really need to start giving our teachers the kind of professional development and support that we give our athletes. Otherwise, we won't have enough good teachers, we won't have them long enough in the profession. So I'm talking about good teaching, but what exactly is good teaching? Well, there's a ton of resource and a ton of jargon, but essentially boils down to 5 things. Good teachers know their content, they know how to teach their content, they know how to use assessment data to improve instruction, they understand how children learn and grow, and they believe that every child can learn. And what kind of professional development do we need, and what kind of professional development do these teachers want? And that's where it gets actually a little bit tricky, because surprisingly, we don't know in many cases because we never ask teachers. So I have a really horrendous chart. Can you hear me? Which I'm about to explain. And all you need to know is that this is a chart from the OECD, which actually surveyed 23,000 teachers in 28 countries and asked them to describe the professional development in which they participate and then its impact. I apologize for the clutter, and this will be in the proceedings, but what I really want you to look at are 3 things. The light green indicates a level of participation, and the dark green indicates teachers' perceived impact of this professional development. You'll see that there's different models of professional development networks, workshops and trainings, mentoring and peer support, reading professional literature, observations, and individual and collaborative research. What's really interesting, especially for those of you in the back that can't see the numbers, is where you see the greatest disparity in bars is the professional development that the teachers participate in least. Networks, observations, mentoring, and peer support is the same professional development our athlete gets. It's also the professional development that teachers say they value the most, and yet they get it the least. So this is data from the OECD, so that's all the rich people. I work in poor countries. And in the countries I work in, teachers need and want the same kind of professional development. This is from India. It's a survey I did 5 years ago, And I asked teachers, what professional development matters most to you? What do you want? And they said exactly the same things as research tells us about good professional development and what the OECD teachers said. They want models of best practice, they want collaboration, they want mentoring and peer support. What they want least is what they get most, and that is workshops and trainings. So, you know this. And this really begs two questions, and that is, number one, why do we do this? Why don't we give teachers the professional development they want? And number two, how can we start doing this? And I think even though these are two divergent questions, they really come down to the same source, and that is that we do not see teachers as learners. We see students as learners, obviously, they're in school. And we understand that students are unique learners, that they learn through a variety of experiences, that their learning has to be differentiated, it should be meaningful, it should be real. But we don't have that same set of values for teachers, and that's reflected in our policy and in lack of funding and in a one-size-fits-all approach with teachers that we wouldn't do with students. We believe in student-centered learning across the planet. Whether we do it or not, we believe in it. We need a system of teacher-centered professional development. And what would this look like? Well, it would be very similar to what our football players get. It would be very similar to what OECD and Indian teachers say they want, and it would be very similar to what research says is best practice in professional development. It would be professional development that recognizes that teachers, like their students, need ongoing support. It would be professional development that recognizes that teachers, like their students, are social learners and learn from their peers. It would be professional development that recognizes that teachers, like their students, need opportunities for practice and revision and reflection. And it would be professional development that recognizes that teachers are unique individuals who need differentiated learning. Now, there are places that are doing this. Singapore is doing this. Korea is doing this. Excuse me. There are states in my country and projects that I've designed that are doing this. But these are the exceptions. They're not the rule. So I'll just conclude here by saying, at this conference about innovation, if we don't start working with our teachers and giving them the same opportunities that we give athletes, we will never have successful innovation. And I'll also close with an anecdote, which is that I travel around the world, and I talk to ministries of education about innovation, namely technology. And I often say to them, why is it you want this thing? And they say to me, we want this because we want to have the best students in the world. And I just conclude here by saying that no country can have the best students in the world unless it also has the best teachers in the world. So thank you very much.
I just wanted to add two dimensions, and I'm sympathetic to your analogy with the athlete, but I'd like also to do another analogy with intellectuals. Mm-hmm. And I think we also need to treat our teachers like intellectuals. And I think it's not all about coaching, but if they are to become professionals, they should be able to create their own knowledge. Mm-hmm. And the only way they can create their own knowledge is by themselves developing research skills. So I'm currently directing a Middle East Institute at the American University in Cairo, and what we're actually doing is creating partnerships between faculties of education and schools, mm-hmm. and really getting academic faculty of education graduate students to become more immersed in practice and practicum, and getting teachers to be more reflective and research prone. And there's a lot of excitement about it. Yeah. Teachers want to be treated like intellectuals. They're very excited about mm-hmm. research methods. They do want to be able to reflect and do their own research mm-hmm. in a school-based fashion, again in a collaborative fashion and with their colleagues. Another thing that we will be aiming at doing is creating forums for teachers, because Singapore is hugely successful. Why? Also because of the motivation. Teachers were constantly motivated to be nation builders. And to be a nation builder, you need to understand how you position yourself in the classroom vis-a-vis the economy, the political economy, and your role in the bigger picture. So that requires liberal arts knowledge. So creating forums where teachers are learning not just subject matter, not just their techniques, not just coaching on their techniques, but the bigger picture of why they're in their classrooms.
So these are great points. All I'm going to do is, there's a man back here who doesn't know that I know who he is, but he's with one of my favorite organizations, which is ASCD in the United States. So the two of you should probably talk at some point. Other questions, comments?
I am Professor Chaudhary. I am from Singapore, about which a lot has been talked about. And I work in the university, but coming to the teachers in the schools and other things, we have a strong collaboration between the schools and the university. And every teacher in the schools are allowed to spend about 100 days, if necessary, in the university and be part of the research programs and send the students, together with the students, they do come to the university and be involved in the research part. And that is the part of the professional development for the teachers in Singapore.
Well, I think actually this is a conference about innovation, so all the big minds are here. And I think really if this is going to happen, it has to be driven by a place like Singapore, because you also have amazing test scores, which in my country is all we really care about at this point. So I think we need to deputize a place like Singapore really to drive this whole process, because it won't happen without people who are in places like this who make decisions who start to drive this process. Do we have time for other questions? Comments, questions? If you don't ask me something, I'll start singing. I knew that would work.
Sure. Okay, hi, this is Matthew Kam from American Institutes for Research. So I think what you've said is great, but given the kind of realities on the ground in developing countries where there's a shortage of teacher trainers and teacher development is done using the Cascade model, so what in your experience have you found to be effective in trying to actually do teacher professional development to meet those goals that you've mentioned given all these constraints?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that. So Matthew and I both work for organizations that get funding from donors, and this is really lost on them. They are, frankly, they are really focused on numbers. And so you've got 2 years to train, a horrible word, 60,000 people to basically change everything you've ever done in your professional life and do it in a 5-day workshop with no support. But still, there are opportunities to do good things. So one of the things we did in Indonesia was we actually designed a coaching program. So I will just say that I hate the Cascade approach. I think it can work in countries with a lot of capacity in the system, but it is a failure, and it is a research-proven failure in developing country contests. And yet it is typical of the recycled best practices, recycled bad practices that we give developing countries all the time. We wouldn't pull this on US teachers because they know it fails, but we don't have any qualms about going to Indonesia and trying it there. So it doesn't work. And so we did a big, giant public-private partnership with a very well-known technology company which trains teachers. And then I went around and I asked, how many teachers are implementing? And I said to a group of principals, is it 10%? And they laughed. And I said, it's not 10%? And they said, if you're generous, it's 10%. So I realized this isn't working. So we did a coaching program. We trained people to be a coach. We spent 6 months on how to be a coach. These were educational supervisors, so this was hard for them. We put a coach in each school. The coach was there 4 days a week and had a partner so that we made sure that they were showing up. The implementation rate on this technology program went from below 10% to 98%. One teacher didn't implement. That was a small pilot. It was 300 people. It's coaching, it's support. I mean, we know this from implementation research. A little bit of training is better than no training. A tiny bit of coaching is better than a lot of training. This is true in every profession. That's what we need to move to. But donors don't like it. It's expensive, it's long, it's not easy. We like fast, quick, and easy, but fast, quick, and easy don't work. Sir.
I'm just interested in how really, you know, this technology, this professional development you're talking about, how does it really relate to teacher motivation? Especially, you know, the fact that you're working in rural area, in you know, developing countries. If you take the Gambia, for example, the majority of the teachers really, you know, need professional development. But they are not motivated because their salaries are poor, you know, the working conditions are, you know, poor and all those. So, and yet this is something we really need. So how do we really go about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to imply that professional development is a panacea. I don't think it is. I mean, I think there are all these contextual factors like poor working conditions and too many children, et cetera. So, but I do think, and I don't know your name, but you hit on a lot of these points. I mean, I have found in my life with teachers, and I work in really poor countries. So, you know, I work in places like Pakistan, I work in Central Africa. If you treat people like professionals, they will perform. People want to do a good job. I said this to Miguel, who preceded me and has now left, but I've worked with thousands of teachers, and I was a teacher. I don't know anybody that gets up in the morning and says, I'm deliberately going to do a crappy job today. People, you have a small group that doesn't care, it's true, but most people care. And then I think this goes back to your question, which is the implementer thing, and this is incumbent on us, and I think it's incumbent on governments, because people come in, whether they're technology companies or donors, and they say, we have this program, but we don't make demands of them. We don't say, okay, you know, we want teachers to be, you know, we want this kind of professional development. We want, you know, we want long-term investment. We don't say those, we don't argue best practice, and I do think there's a little bit of sort of pushback on our part. But, you know, even in the poorest conditions, you will find gems of teachers. So in India, I'll be really fast because I'm sure I'm over my time. I was in a classroom with a teacher who had 300 children. And she had nothing. She had a blackboard, and she had 300 kids who all sat on the floor. But, you know, in India, the kids just sit on the floor. And so she was trying to do the additive properties she was trying to show students the different, you know, how addition and multiplication are related. I was such a bad math student, I can't even explain this. So she actually used the students as learning objects. She actually had 2 groups of 3, 3 groups of 2. She had them running around the room to explain, this is addition, this is multiplication, but see, you get the same answer. So everywhere we find those really good people. In a dysfunctional system, people act dysfunctionally. So I don't discount that. But even in a dysfunctional system, you have people that really are jewels, and we have to find that and nurture that. I mean, that's what this conference is about, I think. So I think, am I done, or keep going? Oh, my God. Anything else?
I'm Gail C. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning here at the American School of Doha. And really, it's just a comment. As I see at our school, and we're quite a unique school, we're a lucky school, but I see a changing playing field where we used to bring experts in who would come in and deliver to us, and we've moved to embedded professional learning where our teachers are working in the classrooms with people coming in and guiding them. But what I see in terms of change and the power is that what happens in the conversations, the reflective conversations, the debriefing that happens after they've had that experience in the classroom. And we're seeing a lot of success and change happening because of that. Just a comment.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so Gail, that gets people like me out of work, you know. But actually, it is, I mean, who better to learn from than your colleagues, especially if you have facilitated conversations. Thank you all very much.